At Thanksgiving dinner, my parents declared me a worthless burden and told me to live on the streets. They didn't realize I earned $25 million annually, so I just smiled and left 3 weeks later. Can you imagine being told to go live in the streets by your own family, only to realize you could buy their entire neighborhood with what you made last month? That's my story. It's about a betrayal so deep it cut me to the bone, and a comeback so unexpected, it turned their world upside down. My name is Harper Lane. I'm 32, and let me tell you, earning $25 million a year doesn't protect you from toxic parents. Money can shield you from a lot of things: rent, fear, instability, but it can't shield you from a family determined to believe the worst version of you. I learned that lesson on Thanksgiving night, standing in my parents' dining room in suburban Portland. I was surrounded by people who had already decided exactly what happened, exactly who I was and who I wasn't. The house looked the same as always: warm lights, cinnamon candles, the smell of roasted turkey. But the atmosphere? You could slice it with a knife. The long mahogany table was crowded. My grandparents sat at the far end, my aunts whispered behind their wine glasses, my cousins were glued to their phones. And there, glowing in the center like the sun, was Chloe, my younger sister. Everyone else orbited around her. Her fiancé, Luke, sat beside her with this eager smile, a man who'd clearly absorbed the Lane family hierarchy. Chloe, the pride. Me, the problem. Chloe was everything my parents worshipped. A rising star attorney at a downtown Portland firm, wedding planned for next spring, a closet full of designer coats, a LinkedIn profile so polished it practically sparkled. My mother couldn't go 10 minutes without slipping in a new brag. Chloe just closed a massive case. Chloe might be promoted to partner early. Chloe and Luke are looking at investment properties. My girl is so smart. Meanwhile, I sat near the end of the table in a chair that wobbled. No one ever seemed to notice the wobble. Maybe that was fitting. "Harper," Michelle finally asked after ignoring me for nearly an hour, "are you still doing that little online thing?" She said it the way someone might talk about a hobby involving glitter and glue. I just smiled politely. It wasn't worth explaining that my little online thing employed over 90 people across 3 states. Or that one of my companies had just finalized a multi-million-dollar licensing deal. It wouldn't matter. They'd already decided my life was just a phase I'd eventually grow out of. I cut into my turkey, hoping the evening would pass quietly. But peace never survives long in the Lane household, especially when Chloe felt like stirring the pot. "It's honestly sad," she announced loudly to Luke, though the entire table could hear. "Harper still refuses to finish college. Can you imagine being 32 and still not having your life together?" Luke chuckled sympathetically. My mother sighed dramatically, as if I had disappointed her again just by daring to exist outside her script. And then my father, always the judge, never the jury, decided it was time for this year's performance review. He set down his fork with a sharp clink and cleared his throat, loud enough for the entire table to fall silent. "Harper," he began, "your mother and I have been talking." My stomach tightened. Nothing good ever followed that sentence. "You're 32, he continued, his voice growing louder, "and you're still chasing those silly internet dreams. You refuse to listen. You refuse to follow the path we gave you. It's embarrassing." My mother nodded quickly, chiming in before I could speak. "We're tired of worrying about you. Tired of pretending you're doing fine when you clearly aren't. You never take real advice. You never act like a member of this family." Their words should have stung. Once upon a time, when I was younger and still naive enough to crave their approval, they might have. Now they just washed over me like cold water. Annoying, predictable, pointless. Chloe folded her manicured hands on the table and added her own dagger, her tone sweet as pie. "Honestly, Harper, if you had just finished college like a normal person, you wouldn't be such a burden. Some people have careers, not whatever you do." A few relatives exchanged awkward glances. Some looked down at their plates. Not one person spoke up for me. Not even the grandparents who used to slip me candy under the table when I was little. That silence said everything. And then the moment hit its breaking point. My father slammed his palm onto the table so hard the cranberry sauce trembled. "You're 32 and have nothing to show for it," he barked. "From now on, we're done. No more help, no more pity. If you want to ruin your life, fine, but don't drag us into it anymore." He stood, pointed toward the door, and delivered the sentence that would replay in my head for weeks to come. "Go live in the streets if you have to. A hush fell over the entire room. Forks froze mid-air. Someone gasped softly. And I, the highest-earning person in that house, owner of a penthouse in Seattle, donor to 3 major nonprofits, employer of nearly 100 people. I just sat there watching the scene like an out-of-body experience. I opened my mouth. For one reckless second I nearly said it. I make more than everyone at this table combined. But I didn't. Because what would be the point? They weren't interested in the truth. They were interested in the version of me that made them feel superior. So instead I took a slow breath, pushed back my chair and stood. If that's how you feel, I said quietly, I won't get in your way. My father looked shocked that I didn't argue. My mother blinked rapidly, clearly expecting tears. Chloe wore a half-smile like she'd won something. Without another word, I grabbed my coat, walked past my family and stepped out into the cold November air. The wind cut through my sweater, but it felt cleaner than anything inside that house. As I walked down the driveway toward my car, I whispered the truth only to myself. They have no idea I make $25 million a year. I opened the door, climbed inside and started the engine. If you grow up hearing the same story about yourself over and over again, eventually you start to wonder whether it's really your story, or a script someone forced into your hands long before you understood what any of it meant. Driving away from my parents' house that Thanksgiving night, the cold seeping through my coat, it hit me how deeply that script had been carved into my life. Their outburst wasn't new. Their disappointment wasn't new. Their humiliation wasn't new. It had been building for years, layer by layer, comment by comment, expectation by expectation, until it became the only language my family knew how to speak to me. So I guess we need to go back. Back to where the Lane family image first started strangling the Lane family reality. Back to when I was 16 and still naive enough to believe families were supposed to feel like safety, not performance. My parents, Daniel and Rebecca Lane, came from modest, hardworking backgrounds. But by the time Chloe and I were teenagers, they had settled nicely into what they considered the respectable middle class. Dad was a supervisor at a construction management company, a job he carried like a badge. To him, respectability came from hierarchy. Someone above you, someone below you, and you sitting neatly in the middle, admired by neighbors for being reliable and stable. He ironed his shirts obsessively. He introduced himself formally, even at backyard barbecues. He couldn't stand the idea of being seen as less than in any social setting. Mom was a school nurse, the kind who was warm with students but cold with adults. She had one guiding question in life, the same one she repeated like a prayer. What will people think? Not what do you want? Not what makes you happy? Only, what will people think? Her entire existence revolved around avoiding any potential stain on the family image. Reputation wasn't just important to her. It was her oxygen. And then there was Chloe. Perfect, polished Chloe. 2 years younger than me but always positioned miles ahead. She had private violin lessons, a personal math tutor, dance classes, leadership camps, summer trips abroad. Whatever she touched, my parents treated like destiny. She attended an expensive private school for children with potential. And every dollar spent on her came with a breathless compliment from Mom. She's so poised. He's so mature. She's going places. Dad loved bragging about her GPA to anyone who would listen, even strangers at the grocery store checkout. Chloe was prom queen her junior year, president of the debate team, took photos that always landed perfectly on her Instagram feed. She never broke rules. Not because she was inherently good, but because approval was her favorite currency. She knew exactly how to play the part. Smart, charming, compliant, the golden daughter who made her parents glow. Then you have me, the other daughter. I liked computers, coding, building little websites from scratch, staying up late dissecting the back end of e-commerce platforms. Fascinated by how algorithms worked. I could lose hours debugging a single line of code and feel thrilled when I finally solved it. I wasn't into dances or popularity contests. I wasn't graceful or poised or photogenic in the way my mother desperately wished. I liked quiet. I liked being alone. To my parents, that meant I was odd, antisocial, not a people person. They said it like a diagnosis. When I started helping small businesses make money online at 16, building web pages, designing email automations, testing ad copy, my parents didn't see talent. They saw a phase, a quirk, something I'd grow out of once I stopped being difficult. Meanwhile, everything Chloe did was applauded as if she'd invented gravity. I still remember the dinner when she'd gotten a 97 on a biology test. My mother toasted her with sparkling cider like she'd been accepted to Harvard Medical School. The same night, I tried to share that a client had paid me $200 for a website redesign. My father didn't even look up from his plate. "Don't brag," Mom said sharply. "It's tacky." "But Chloe? That's different." Different. Everything was always different for Chloe. The turning point, the moment my family decided who I would be for the rest of my life, came during my second year of college. I had gotten into a business program mostly because my parents insisted college was the only path to respectability. I tried. I really did. But lectures felt like cages. And the more I learned about theoretical business models, the more I wanted to build something real instead of just studying it in a fluorescent-lit classroom. During sophomore year, I took a leap. One of my online projects suddenly took off, an e-commerce automation tool I built from scratch. I was making more money than most of my professors. I felt alive for the first time in years. So, I made the decision that changed everything. I dropped out. I can still see my parents' faces the night I told them. My father went red first, his anger always rose like a slow boil. My mother went pale, her hands trembling the way they only did when she imagined herself being judged by someone else. "You're throwing your life away for some silly.com fad." Dad snapped, pacing the kitchen as if he needed room for his disappointment to stretch. "Do you know how ridiculous this looks? Do you know what people will say?" Mom didn't yell, but her voice was sharper than his. "Harper, why can't you just be normal? Chloe follows the plan. She works hard. She respects her family. Why can't you be more like her?" That was the moment I became the family embarrassment. And from that day forward, every holiday dinner followed the same script. Chloe's achievements were recited like scripture. The perfect GPA, the impressive internships, the glowing letters of recommendation, the prestigious job offers. And then, inevitably, someone would glance at me with that practiced look of concern and say something like, "Not everyone finds their path so quickly. Maybe someday you'll go back and finish school. Success isn't for everyone. You'll get there eventually." I became the cautionary tale, the living, breathing example of what happens when you don't listen to your parents. My role, assigned without consent, was to make Chloe look better by comparison. And every time I tried to explain what I actually did for a living, they reduced it to nothing with a single dismissive line. "Just online stuff." When I was 18, I stood at a bus stop with nothing but a laptop that overheated every 2 hours and a stubborn belief that the internet could change my life, long before it changed anyone else's mind. After dropping out of college, I moved into a tiny studio apartment the size of a storage closet. The walls were so thin I could hear my neighbor sneeze, and my kitchen counter shook when the bus rolled by outside. There was no safety net, no emergency fund, no family cushioning my fall, no one offering backup plans. I spent the mornings doing freelance design work, the afternoons fixing broken Shopify themes for small businesses, and the nights teaching myself everything I could get my hands on. Coding, funnels, paid ads, email automation, consumer psychology, A/B testing, search engine optimization, analytics, dashboards. I devoured it all like oxygen. My 20s were a blur of glowing screens, cheap coffee, and too many notebooks filled with scribbled flowcharts. I worked, sometimes 3 jobs at once, freelance in the morning, consulting for a struggling startup in the afternoon, then staying up past 3 a.m. building software tools I wasn't even sure anyone would want. I lived on instant ramen, microwaved vegetables, and whatever leftovers clients handed me after late-night meetings. The hustle wasn't glamorous. It was survival. But it was mine. And what mattered most was that I never, not once, asked my parents for $1. I refused to give them the satisfaction of saying, "I told you so." If I failed, it would be on my own terms. Not because I crawled back home begging for money. So I worked and worked and worked. The turning point came when a small, nearly unknown skincare brand reached out, asking if I could help them fix their website. Their revenue at the time was barely covering expenses, but I saw potential. A great founder, a good product, and terrible digital systems. I optimized their backend, built a subscription retention engine, set up automated email flows, restructured their ads, and redesigned the entire website myself. In 6 months, revenue quadrupled. In a year, they crossed 7 figures. In 18 months, they hit 8. Instead of a flat fee, I had negotiated a tiny slice of equity and a revenue share contract that everyone else thought was pointless at the time. That one decision changed everything. The first time I saw the payout hit my account, I sat on my bedroom floor and cried. Because it felt unreal. Like the first moment someone in the world had said, "You were right to believe in yourself." That success rippled outward. Other brands reached out, founders talked, my inbox filled. Suddenly, I had more work than one person could handle. So, I did what terrified and thrilled me. I started hiring. First, a designer, then a media buyer, then a data analyst, then a development assistant. And just like that, my one-woman operation turned into a real agency. Lane Digital Systems, specializing in e-commerce automation and performance growth. But I didn't stop there. I created a SaaS tool that automated customer retention for Shopify stores. Originally a passion project I built at 2 a.m. while eating cold pizza, I launched it quietly, expecting maybe a handful of clients. It exploded. Within 6 months, it had thousands of paying users. Within a year, it became the backbone of half a dozen mid-sized brands. From there, everything scaled. 3 more companies branched out under my umbrella. One specializing in AI-driven ad optimization, another offering white-label automation systems for agencies, and a consulting firm for founders transitioning from 6 to 7 figures. With each year came new income streams, licensing deals, subscription revenue, retainer contracts, data partnerships. I diversified as aggressively as I worked. By the time I turned 30, Lane Systems had grown into a quiet empire that no one outside my clients, partners, and employees really knew existed. I built it intentionally that way, under the radar, private, controlled. Now at 32, my life looked nothing like the failure narrative my parents clung to. I lived in a penthouse overlooking the Seattle waterfront, paid in full before my 30th birthday, floor-to-ceiling windows, a home office with custom-built screens and a private server rack, a balcony with a view of the ferries gliding across Elliott Bay. I had a real estate portfolio of rental homes in Washington, Oregon, and Texas. I had a stock account that my younger self wouldn't have believed, even if she saw the numbers herself. And each year, after expenses, investments, payroll, and taxes, my personal profits still hovered around $25 million. But none of that, not one part of it, was known to my parents. They had absolutely no idea. Part of it was practical. The second they smelled money, they would have tried to control it, claim credit for it, or tap into it. My parents loved 2 things above all else: Chloe and image. If they knew I made millions, they would have twisted my success into something that made them look good. We raised her, right? We always knew she was smart. And then used it to boost Chloe even further. But the bigger part? They simply never asked. They didn't ask what I did. Didn't ask how my work evolved. Didn't ask about clients, projects, tools, teams, anything. Every time I tried to explain in the early years, they shut me down with the same lines. It's not a real career. It's unstable. It's not respectable. Eventually I stopped trying. So I told them I did marketing, freelance, online stuff, website consulting, vague enough to avoid questions, boring enough to shut down further conversation. And Chloe? She didn't care what I did. She only cared that whatever it was, it put her above me in the family hierarchy. She never once, not once, asked, "How's your business? What are you building? What are you excited about?" My success had no place in the image they curated, so it simply didn't exist to them. Looking back, maybe that was my first mistake. I thought if I kept my world separate from theirs, I could avoid the emotional fallout that exploded that Thanksgiving night. But hiding didn't save me from being misunderstood. It only allowed them to cling to their outdated version of me. So I wouldn't change it. Because building everything on my own, without their praise, their help, their money, or their belief, made every victory sweeter. Every milestone felt earned. Every risk felt worthwhile. And ironically, every single assumption my family made about me only pushed me harder. Maybe some part of me did work those late nights just to prove them wrong in the quietest, most powerful way possible. Not with words, not with arguments, but with results. Results they would one day see, not because I showed them, but because the truth had grown too big for their small opinions to contain. They thought I was a cautionary tale. They didn't know I was becoming the person their future would depend on. And in 3 weeks they would learn exactly how wrong they had been. The drive back to Seattle that night felt longer than it ever had before. Maybe it was the cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and sits there refusing to leave. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way my father's voice, "Go live in the streets if you have to," kept echoing in the back of my skull like a song stuck on repeat. I had heard harsh words from them before, but somehow hearing it on Thanksgiving in front of an entire table of relatives landed differently. Not sharper, not more dramatic, just final. By the time I pulled into the parking garage of my building in Seattle, my fingers were stiff from gripping the wheel. I took the elevator up, my reflection blurry in the metal doors. And when I stepped into my penthouse, the scent of cedar and lemon cleaner hit me. A smell that always meant home. Real home. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the living room, revealing the waterfront glittering under the city lights. Ferries drifting across the dark water like slow-moving lanterns. The hardwood floors, the minimalist furniture, the soft hum of the heating system. Everything felt warm, calm, intentional. It was a stark, almost painful contrast to the words I'd left behind. Go live in the streets. I kicked my shoes off and let them land wherever they wanted. Then walked to the balcony door, pressing my palm against the cool glass. From 30 stories up, the world looked peaceful. No judgment, no disappointed sighs, no Chloe smiling with that patronizing pity she'd perfected since we were teenagers. My parents had no idea this place existed. No idea what my life looked like outside their narrow lens. If I had shown them this home, they would have found a way to ruin it. Criticizing the view, the cost, the location, the choices. That was the thing about toxic families. Even your wins were treated like disappointments. I showered, made chamomile tea and tried to sleep, but my mind wouldn't let me. Their voices replayed again and again until the words blended into noise. Useless, embarrassing, still chasing silly internet dreams. It was ridiculous, irrational. I knew better. I knew what I'd built. I knew the lives I employed, the millions in revenue, the systems I created that kept entire companies running. But even when you grow up and build an empire, something in you always remembers being 16, sitting at the dinner table, getting compared to the golden child who could do no wrong. I slept maybe 3 hours. Then came week 1. No calls, no text messages, not even a passive-aggressive email disguised as concern. You'd think after throwing your daughter out of the house publicly, loudly, they would at least check whether she'd made it home safely, whether she had somewhere to stay, whether she was okay. But my phone stayed silent. On Monday morning, I woke at 5 a.m. like always, forced myself into my gym leggings, tied my hair back and walked to the building fitness center. I ran 5 miles on the treadmill, sweat dripping down my neck, my brain rehashing conversations I wished I could unhear. Then I showered, made a protein shake and joined my first call of the day with the Europe team. After that came virtual meetings with 2 new partnerships, contract negotiations, a financial review with my CFO, and a strategy briefing for our SaaS development pipeline. From the outside it looked like a perfectly normal, perfectly productive week. But I felt hollow. Like someone had scooped something out of my chest and left the space empty. Not broken, not devastated, just blank. I kept catching myself thinking the same thought over and over. I could buy their house with last month's profit. And yet somehow their words still stung. Why did it still hurt? Why did any of it matter? I had left behind their version of success years ago. I had built something extraordinary, something real, something mine. Yet the emotional bruises from childhood didn't fade just because your bank account grew. Money didn't erase the part of you that once begged to be understood. On Thursday around lunchtime, I opened Instagram while waiting for my food to heat up and felt my stomach sink. Chloe had posted a photo from Thanksgiving dinner, a carefully staged shot of her, Luke, and my parents standing in front of the fireplace, smiling like an advertisement for familial bliss. She looked radiant, glowing under the filter, Luke's arm around her waist. My mother's hand rested on Chloe's shoulder with pride. My father stood tall, smug, content. The caption read, "So grateful for family and new beginnings," with a heart emoji. My name wasn't mentioned. Not even a vague, "wish everyone could have been here tonight," or "missing a few people but still thankful." It was as if I had already been erased from the family tree. They looked whole, complete without me. The comments were full of compliments. "Beautiful family. Such a blessed Thanksgiving. So much love here. Congrats on the engagement." I turned off my phone. That night, while brushing my teeth, memories pushed themselves to the front of my mind like unwelcome guests. Other holidays, other dinners, other nights where the message had been the same, just delivered softer. Like the Christmas when Chloe got the big guest room and I got the sofa. "Because you don't mind, right, Harper? Chloe needs good rest for her college interviews." Or the Easter when my aunt tried to set me up with her neighbor's son because you really need someone stable in your life. Or the 4th of July barbecue when another cousin asked me with the same gentle condescension I'd heard my entire life. So, when will you get a real job? Something, respectable. Even the seating arrangements told a story. Chloe always sat in the best spots in the center where the family could admire her. I always ended up on the folding chair at the corner next to the pantry door. I used to think it was coincidence. Now I wasn't so sure. A pattern. It was all a pattern. And now Thanksgiving had simply been the loudest repetition of what had already been whispered for years. On Saturday afternoon I found myself standing by the window staring out at the water again. Cargo ships moved slowly across Puget Sound, sunlight catching on their hulls. I realized then that what I was feeling wasn't heartbreak. It wasn't shock. It was recognition. They hadn't changed. They'd never changed. What happened at Thanksgiving wasn't a break from the norm. It was the norm just sharpened and magnified. The same dynamic, the same script, the same hierarchy. Chloe shining at the center. Me pushed to the edges, judged for refusing to follow their blueprint. But for the first time, instead of trying to fit their mold, I understood something far more important. Week 2 didn't begin with anger. It began with disbelief. The kind of stunned, quiet disbelief you feel when you realize that even after everything, your family isn't done hurting you. You think the worst moment was the night they told you to go live in the streets. But somehow the real damage doesn't come from the shouting. It comes from the stories they tell about you afterward when you're not there to defend yourself. It was early Monday morning when my phone buzzed while I was reviewing a proposal from one of our European partners. The message came from Megan, my cousin on my mom's side, one of the only people in the family who treated me like a real human being rather than a cautionary tale. Megan was 2 years younger than me, a graphic designer living in Portland, and she had a habit of sending texts like tiny emotional temperature checks. Her message read, "Hey, just checking. Are you okay? I heard something weird." I replied, "Define weird." 3 dots pulsed, disappeared, then came back again. "Your mom told everyone at church you're couch surfing with friends in Seattle because your little online project failed." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a strange mix of amusement and pain twist in my chest. Couch surfing? Failed project? Of course. It wasn't enough that they kicked me out. They needed a story that made them look like the benevolent, heartbroken parents who had tried everything. I typed back, "I have 4 bedrooms and no couch surfers, but good to know." Megan sent back a supportive curse word, then added, "I'm sorry. They're making you sound like some lost stray. It's gross." I thanked her, but the truth was the sting landed deeper than I expected. Because it wasn't you. This was how my family operated when faced with something uncomfortable. They rewrote reality until they became the heroes and I became the problem. Over the next few days, more pieces of their narrative trickled in through people who cared enough to warn me. Apparently, my mother had stood in the middle of her church group, one of those weekly circles filled with women who traded prayer requests and gossip with the same breath, and sighed heavily as she painted a portrait of her wayward, stubborn daughter. "Harper refuses to accept help," she'd said with a trembling voice, as if she were the victim of a daughter's cruelty rather than the perpetrator of a lifetime of emotional erasure. "She's lost. She keeps chasing these online schemes. We had no choice but to let her fall so she can learn." Let her fall. As if they hadn't shoved me first. By Wednesday evening, Megan sent another update. A photo snapped discreetly from behind a row of chairs. In it, my mother stood in front of a small circle of women, clutching her sweater like a grieving widow. The women around her leaned in, nodding sympathetically, comforting her, validating her pain. The caption Megan added under the photo was, "I'm sorry. This is the performance she's giving." I stared at the picture for a long time, feeling something inside me go cold. Not angry, not even sad, just cold. Because I finally understood something I had never wanted to admit. My parents didn't just misunderstand me. They needed me to fail. They needed that narrative to keep their own image polished and uncracked. To explain away every bad parenting choice, to justify their obsession with Chloe. Speaking of Chloe, she wasn't just participating, she was thriving in the aftermath. One of her friends from law school, Lexi, posted a story on Instagram. A brunch photo with mimosas and avocado toast and Chloe laughing with the confidence of someone who had never actually been challenged in her life. The caption under it tagging Chloe reading, "About family stuff. Harper really spiraled, huh?" Chloe had replied in the comments, "Some people just don't understand responsibility." And then in another comment, We warned her MMs weren't a real career. She told people I was doing not marketing, not tech, not SaaS, not automation labs, not the multi-million-dollar empire I'd built from nothing. That was ignorance. That was malice. I put my phone down and exhaled slowly. The kind of breath that feels like it's leaving your soul, not your lungs. They weren't just letting me go. They weren't just cutting me out. They were rewriting who I was into something that made sense to them. Something beneath Chloe, beneath their ideals, beneath their expectations. They needed the world to believe I was floundering so that they wouldn't have to question the story they'd spent years building. The golden daughter and the failure. And of course, what better way to elevate Chloe than to cast me as the disaster, the warning sign, the example of what happens when you don't follow the plan, the daughter who couldn't measure up, the one who justified every ounce of favoritism they'd poured into her. I went through the motions that week, meetings, workouts, but the weight of their narrative settled over me like fog. Not because I believed them, not because any of it was true, but because I had lived long enough in their world to know how powerful perception can be. If they controlled the story long enough, people would believe them. People already were. But as that realization crystallized, something else rose quietly beneath it. Something stronger, steadier, colder. Determination. Because I had spent years hiding my success, not to protect myself, but to protect them, to avoid their meddling, to avoid becoming their trophy, to avoid their questions and expectations and greed. But now they were using me, my silence, my distance, my privacy as an empty canvas to paint themselves as victims and saints. And that was the moment I made a quiet decision. If they wanted a narrative war, I could give them one. Not through pettiness, not through shouting, not through petty online posts, but through truth. And the truth, once revealed, would shatter every lie they had built. Week 2 wasn't just painful, it was clarifying. Because once you realize your family would rather destroy your reputation than confront their own failures, there's only one path left to take. You stop trying to earn their love and you start preparing to earn your freedom. Week 3 didn't arrive gently. It didn't knock or whisper or announce itself the way emotional hurt usually does. It crashed into my life like a quiet explosion. Silent, contained, but devastating in its precision. In the first week they erased me. In the second they rewrote me. In the third they stole from me. Or worse, they used me. It happened on a Tuesday morning around 6:40 a.m. I had just finished a call with my London team when a new email slid into my inbox with the subject line, "Urgent confirmation required regarding your guarantee on the Lane home renovation loan." At first I thought it was spam, scam, phishing, something automated that slipped past filters. But the sender wasn't suspicious. It was from a law firm in Portland I recognized, one that handled mid-sized real estate financing and family lending. My stomach tightened. I clicked it open. "Dear Mississippi Lane, we are reaching out to confirm your continued willingness to act as co-signer and guarantor for the Lane Residence Renovation and Expansion Loan, originally filed July 12, 2 years ago. Due to adjusted interest terms, we need your written approval within 10 business days." I reread the paragraph 5 times, each slower than the last. Co-signer? Guarantor? No, absolutely not. I had never co-signed anything for my family. I would have sooner lit my own credit score on fire. I grabbed my phone, dialed the number from the email and waited. A paralegal picked up, cheerful and oblivious to the implosion happening inside my chest. Kept my voice level. Professional. "Hi, this is Harper Lane. I'm calling regarding an email about a renovation loan. I think there's been a mistake." She typed. Papers rustled. "Oh yes, Mississippi Lane. We have you listed as guarantor. Let me pull up the original documents." I paced toward the window as she searched. My pulse thudded in my throat. When she returned, her tone was confident. "Prepared. Final. Yes, here it is. The loan was approved with 3 signatures. Daniel Lane, Rebecca Lane, and you as guarantor. Amount, $380,000. My hand tightened around the phone. "I never signed anything." A pause, then the sound of pages flipping. "Well, the paperwork is here. Your signature looks perfectly valid." I asked for a scan. She emailed it. I opened it instantly. My heart dropped into my stomach. It was my name, my handwriting, my signature. Except it wasn't. It was an imitation good enough to fool a bank. My parents had forged my name on a $380,000 loan. It felt like the room tilted sideways. I sank into my office chair, staring at the document as my mind tried to make sense of it. A renovation loan 2 years ago. Before their fancy kitchen update, before the backyard redesign they bragged about, before the new roof, the deck, the property expansion. But then I noticed something else in the paperwork. A section marked discretionary project allocation. A portion of the loan, $90,000, was earmarked for supporting new business ventures within the Lane household. New business ventures. My blood iced. Chloe. I texted Megan immediately. Hey, random question. Did Chloe ever mention how she funded her boutique? Megan. Oh, what? Me just answer. Megan, she told everyone it was smart family financing. Said your parents believed in her vision. Me, did she say that at Thanksgiving? Megan, yep. Your dad bragged about it. Our Chloe is on track to open her own practice. Family teamwork makes dreams work. Then she added, Megan, don't tell me what I think you're about to tell me. Me, they used my name, my credit, behind my back for her business. Another message came through from her a second later. Megan, Harper. I'm so sorry. That's unbelievable. It wasn't unbelievable. That was the worst part. It was exactly believable. Because this was the pattern too. Them investing in Chloe at all costs. Them sacrificing anything, anyone for her success. Them treating her dreams like destiny and mine like mistakes. But forging my signature on a massive loan wasn't favoritism. It was fraud. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was my mother. Coincidence? No. Megan probably messaged her. Word traveled fast in our family. Mom's message read, Harper, honey, I heard the bank reached out. Don't overreact. It's just paperwork. You make good money online. You'll be fine. This was for the family. For the family. I stared at the sentence until it blurred. Then she sent another message. Chloe is our future. You know that. Supporting her is supporting all of us. No apology, no explanation, no shame. Just entitlement. Pure, unfiltered entitlement. In her mind, my financial identity was theirs to use. My credit score was a tool for their convenience. My success, however they imagined it, existed only to serve the golden child. The anger hit me so fast it stole my breath. Not loud anger, not the screaming kind. Cold anger. Precise, steady, focused. Because in that moment, everything crystallized. They didn't just consider me useless. They didn't just erase me. They didn't just lie about me. They used me. Used my name, used my stability, used my financial credibility without my permission to secure a loan that benefited Chloe, not me. They stole from my future to fuel hers. And the worst part? They genuinely believed they were entitled to do it. That was the snap. The exact moment something in me hardened. Not because of the loan, not because of the debt, not because of the betrayal, but because I finally saw them clearly. Not as misguided parents, not as flawed humans, but as people willing to exploit me while calling me a failure. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a resource. And they thought they'd get away with it. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. Not the 16-year-old they used to shame. Not the dropout they mocked at holidays. Not the daughter they shoved out the door on Thanksgiving. They had no idea. None. What a woman earning $25 million a year could do when pushed. Week 3 didn't break me. It forged me. And what came next? That would break them. The night I discovered the forged loan, Seattle felt different. Colder. Quieter. The kind of quiet that makes you hear your own heartbeat in your ears. I stood by the windows of my penthouse, staring out at the skyline, the ferries drifting like glowing ghosts, the city lights flickering against the dark water, the hum of a world that kept moving, even when mine felt like it had tilted off its axis. For a long time I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even curse. I just stood there, letting the weight of the betrayal settle in piece by piece, until it felt almost physical, like something pressing against my ribs from the inside. I had been humiliated, lied about, erased, used, and now financially compromised by the very people who insisted I was worthless. And for the first time in my life I didn't feel like swallowing it. I didn't feel like being the bigger person. I didn't want to endure quietly the way I always had. No, something had shifted. Something deep. Something final. I wasn't just hurt. I was done. But being done didn't mean destroying everything in a burst of emotion. I wasn't Chloe. I wasn't my parents. I didn't operate on impulse or performance or ego. If they wanted to play with my identity, my credit, my name, then I had to respond in a way that ensured they would never get another chance. This wasn't retaliation. It was survival. I grabbed my laptop, opened a blank document and typed one word at the top. Plan. Then I poured myself a glass of water, sat at the dining table and started listing every step I needed to take. Not out of anger but out of cold, calculated clarity. Step 1: Law. Before anything else, I needed legal protection. My signature had been forged on a massive loan. That wasn't just unethical, it was a crime. The next morning, I contacted a high-profile attorney I'd worked with on corporate contracts. She specialized in financial fraud, identity misuse, and high-stakes disputes. Once we were on Zoom, I sent her the scanned loan documents. Her eyebrows lifted. "Harper, this is blatant forgery. Whoever did this wasn't even subtle." "I know," I said quietly. "We'll file a fraud affidavit with the bank immediately," she continued, eyes sharp. "We'll put the loan into dispute, freeze collections, and request a forensic handwriting analysis. We can also request security footage from the branch from the date this was supposedly signed." I exhaled for the first time that day. And if it was my parents? She didn't flinch. "Then we build the evidence and we separate you legally and financially as fast as possible." Step 2: Forensic accounting. If they forged one loan, who was to say they hadn't done more? I hired a forensic accountant, an expert who handled messy divorces, embezzlement cases, and inheritance wars. He was the opposite of dramatic, quiet, methodical, unsettlingly unbothered by the horrors people commit with other people's money. He sent over a list of things he'd start investigating. All financial records tied to my name, credit lines I didn't know existed, applications using my social security number, liens or co-signed documents, the renovation project, Chloe's boutique's funding streams, my parents' debt-to-income ratio, any inheritance trusts my parents might be hiding, whether they'd opened additional loans for the family. He asked for permission to comb through public and private databases. I granted it. Part of me felt sick. Part of me felt relieved. Step 3: Lockdown. That same day, I spent hours securing every aspect of my financial and digital identity. I froze my credit with all bureaus. I locked every account with two-factor authentication. I changed every password. I disabled all outdated credit lines. I removed my parents' home address from anything still linked to my name. I notified my CPA to reroute all business tax documents to a secure vault. I even requested a legal name variation alert to prevent someone from using a misspelled version of my name. By the time I finished, my entire financial existence was fortified. No one could use me again. Not even by accident. Step 4: Not revenge. Revenge is emotional. Information is strategic. I didn't want to destroy my family. I wasn't plotting to ruin anyone's life. I wasn't trying to hurt them the way they had hurt me. But I needed the truth and I needed to be prepared. Because if they were willing to forge my name once, they'd do it again. And if they were willing to steal from me to lift Chloe up, there was no telling how far they'd go. That night, sitting alone at my table, staring at the lights flickering across the water, I felt the ache of betrayal. Not because I wanted revenge, because I finally understood. I had spent years trying to keep the peace with people who were comfortable setting me on fire. And I was done burning for their comfort. I wasn't planning war. I was planning escape, a clean, permanent disentanglement from the people who saw me as a tool. But if they forced a war, then I was going to win. Not with rage, but with evidence, strategy, timing, and the truth. I closed my laptop, leaned back, and whispered to the empty room, "They already set the house on fire. I'm just making sure I don't burn with it." And that was the moment the long game began. Week 4 didn't feel like recovery. It felt like ignition, like something inside me finally clicked into place, sharp and certain, after years of being sanded down to fit a narrative that was never mine. Once the legal work was in motion and the forensic accountant began peeling back layers of my family's finances, something unexpected washed over me. Focus. Not the frantic, survival-focused intensity of my early 20s. Not the numb productivity of week 1. But a deeper, cleaner, more powerful focus. The kind you get when you stop apologizing for your existence. I dove back into work with a clarity I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. I woke up at 4:05 a.m. instead of 5. I beat the sunrise to the gym. I hit my stride before my team even logged on. It felt like I'd shed a skin I didn't realize I'd been trapped in. The pain of the third week sharpened something in me, honed it, stripped away the last pieces of hesitation. Harper rebuilds her power, but quietly. Within days, I was deep into expansion plans I had previously put on hold. Not because I wasn't ready, but because I had been distracted by the fantasy that one day my family would see me differently. Not anymore. I greenlit the opening of a satellite office in New York to cater to our East Coast clients. At the same time, my operations lead in Austin finalized a lease for a second hub, an innovation studio focusing on AI integrations for retail automation. It had been an idea sitting in my notebook for months, waiting for the right time. Apparently, betrayal creates perfect timing. Within 2 weeks, we secured a partnership with a major retail conglomerate, a deal worth 8 figures over 3 years. I flew out to their headquarters, walked into a glass boardroom overlooking the city and met founders. They didn't know about my family drama. They didn't need to. They saw competence, strategy, execution. The version of me my parents refused to see. Recognition. But on my terms. Success attracts attention. The same week the retail deal became official, I was invited to appear on a top-tier podcast for women in tech and entrepreneurship. The host, a well-respected figure in Silicon Valley, asked questions no one in my family had ever asked me. How did you stay disciplined in your early 20s? What would you tell younger women who are underestimated? What's the biggest misconception people have about your field? Misconception? Easy. That it's not real until someone else deems it legitimate. She nodded with quiet understanding. Then came a feature request from a major business magazine. They wanted to spotlight under 35 female founders who had built multi-million-dollar companies quietly without venture capital. I accepted, but with one condition. No mention of my family, no names, no backstory that tied me to them. My achievements didn't belong to them, and I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of writing my newfound visibility. Then the investigators' report dropped. It arrived on a Friday night, a folder of PDFs, spreadsheets, asset breakdowns, and reconstructed financial histories. I poured a cup of tea, sat on my couch, and opened the first file and then the next and then the next. With every page my jaw tightened. My parents were drowning. Their renovation loan was months behind schedule. The interest was snowballing. Their house, the one they kicked me out of, was listed as collateral. Dad's business, Lane Home Remodeling, had been bleeding money for over a year. Bookings were down, suppliers unpaid, tools aging, contracts falling through. They were 3, maybe 4 months from default. And then there was Chloe. Her boutique, her practice, her pride, her statement to the world was hemorrhaging cash. The storefront she rented was in a high-cost arts district. Her branding was gorgeous. Her marketing was flawless. But the business fundamentals? Rotten. Her expenses were double her revenue. She'd hired too many people too soon. She was behind on payroll, behind on taxes, behind on everything. And worst of all, a massive portion of the renovation loan tied to my forged signature had been quietly funneled into Chloe's failing business. The investigator included screenshots and bank traces. It wasn't incompetence. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. They were using my name, my financial identity, to prop up the golden child's collapsing dream. I didn't cry. Didn't shake. Didn't rage. I felt nothing at first. Then something else rose. A sharp, clean, dangerous clarity. The opportunity arrived. On Sunday morning, I received an email from a private equity firm I had invested with the previous year, a group specializing in acquiring distressed properties and failing small businesses. They wanted to offer me a first look at a new acquisition list before it went to public bidding. I opened the document. My heart stopped. There was Lane Home Remodeling listed as a high-risk distressed asset, likely to default within 90 days. Collateral, the Lane family home, plus an adjacent property lot. And below that, under related holdings, a small commercial lease linked to a boutique spa/boutique practice owned by Kane. Chloe's business. Both drowning. Both tied to the same forged loan. Both about to collapse. The firm planned to purchase the assets at a steep discount, pennies on the dollar, then sell or reallocate them to new investors. I knew how this worked. I'd invested in deals like this myself. Quiet acquisitions, clean transitions, no emotion, just numbers. Suddenly I saw the whole path unfold like a blueprint. If the loan defaulted, and it would. If the property went into distress, and it was. And if the firm acquired it, highly likely. I could step in as a silent investor. Own the house my parents worshipped. Own the business my father claimed was his legacy. Own the commercial lease Chloe bragged about. Own everything they leveraged my identity for. Not out of vengeance. Not out of spite. Out of consequence. Because they wrote me out of the family. They erased me. They stole from me. And now they were about to learn the most poetic truth. When you live off someone you call useless, you should pray they never realize their worth. I closed the email slowly. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the forgotten daughter or the black sheep or the disappointment. I felt powerful. Silent. Focused. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about reclaiming every piece of myself they tried to take and building something so undeniable that their entire world would shift the moment they learned who I really was. And that moment was coming soon. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, Seattle glittered with holiday lights, the air smelling like cold pine and distant cinnamon. The kind of festive atmosphere that makes cities feel softer around the edges. But under all that warmth, something entirely different pulsed inside me. Resolve, sharp, unwavering. 3 weeks. Just long enough for my parents to spin their stories. Long enough for Chloe to post curated snapshots of her perfect life. Long enough for them to believe the narrative they had crafted about me had replaced the truth. But also long enough for something else to happen. Something that would change the entire landscape of our family dynamic in a single night. The gala invitation. A week earlier, I had received a formal letter embossed with gold lettering from a Seattle-based foundation, one I had quietly funded for almost 4 years. My company contributed to their youth housing initiative every quarter. I'd always insisted on remaining anonymous, preferring my money to speak louder than my name. But this year, the foundation president wanted to honor one donor in particular, someone who had given enough to build 2 new housing complexes for homeless youth and fund a scholarship pipeline for teens interested in tech. "Harper," she had said over the phone, her voice warm and determined, "it's time the community knows who's behind the work. Please let us honor you publicly." I hesitated. Not because I needed the attention, exposure had never been my goal. But something in me whispered that the timing was right, that maybe after everything letting the world see me clearly wasn't vanity. It was reclamation. So I said yes. The night of the gala, the ballroom glowed with white lights cascading from crystal chandeliers. Tables were draped in navy velvet. The air was filled with the soft murmur of Seattle's business elite, donors, volunteers, city officials. I arrived in a dark emerald gown, hair swept back, makeup subtle but intentional. I looked like a version of myself my family had never bothered to imagine. Put together, powerful, unapologetically present. As I handed my coat to the attendant, I scanned the room. That's when I saw them. My parents. My mother in her pearl necklace. My father with his stiff posture that screamed self-importance. Chloe wrapped in a sequin dress, clinging to Luke's arm like a designer handbag. They stood near a table of their church group, laughing softly, drinking complimentary champagne, taking in the grandeur of an event they clearly felt honored to be invited to. They hadn't seen me yet and they certainly had no idea why I was here. The announcement. An hour into the event, the lights dimmed slightly as the MC stepped onto the stage. The crowd quieted. My heart thudded against my ribs. Not from nerves but from anticipation. The MC smiled, scanning the room. "Tonight," she began, "we want to honor someone extraordinary." A ripple of polite interest moved through the crowd. A donor who has quietly funded some of our most impactful programs. Someone whose success in tech, automation and e-commerce has made it possible to house over 140 young people in the past 2 years. I watched my parents shift. Chloe straightened. None of them suspected a thing. "And this year, after much persuasion," the MC continued, "she has agreed to let us recognize her publicly." Chloe leaned toward my mother, whispering something smug. I nearly laughed. The MC raised her voice with emphasis. "Please join me in applauding our top donor of the year, a woman whose companies generate over $25 million annually. Ms. Harper Lane." My mother froze. The applause rose like a wave. Hundreds of people clapped. The spotlight swept the room and landed on me as I stood. The moment the light hit my face, my parents' expressions fell apart. My father's mouth dropped open. My mother blinked rapidly as if trying to reconcile the name with the reality. Chloe went rigid, her fake smile cracking like old paint. I walked toward the stage, each step echoing through the ballroom, each step rewriting years of their narrative in real time. On the stage, I reached the microphone, the applause fading into an attentive hush. I smiled warmly, lightly, but with the kind of composure that comes only from surviving fire. "Thank you," I began. "I'm honored." I let my eyes scan the room, passing briefly over my parents but not stopping on them. They didn't deserve that acknowledgement. Not here. "I built my first business at 19, I said. Back then a lot of people told me it wasn't real. That online work was a phase, that I would never make anything of myself." My mother flinched. My father looked away. Chloe swallowed. "But I learned something important," I continued, keeping my voice steady, warm. "Some of us are told we're useless, that our work is silly, that our dreams aren't respectable." A murmur rippled through the audience. "But dreams don't need permission, and success doesn't need to be understood by everyone to be real." The room erupted in applause. My parents stayed frozen, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and suffocating realization. Chloe smiled tightly as if trying to pretend she wasn't internally collapsing. I stepped down from the stage as camera flashes lit the room. Several attendees congratulated me, shaking my hand, thanking me for the work I'd funded. I accepted graciously, each compliment another stitch in the narrative I was reclaiming for myself. Across the ballroom, my mother finally broke out of her stupor. She fumbled for her phone, tapping furiously. My bag buzzed a minute later. "Mom, Harper, why didn't you tell us? We're so proud of you." I stared at the message. Proud now? Now that they'd been publicly corrected? Now that they realized their useless failure daughter had been funding programs that their social circle admired? Now that their narrative didn't match reality anymore? I closed the message, left it on read, and slipped my phone back into my clutch. Because tonight wasn't about them. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It wasn't about validation. It wasn't about revenge. Yet, tonight was about taking back the story, showing the world who I really was, and reminding myself that I never needed their approval to shine. The financial reckoning, the real revenge, was still on its way. But this was the first strike. A public truth so undeniable it shattered every lie they'd built. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I was undeniable. 3 weeks after the gala, the storm finally broke. Quietly. Exactly as I knew it would. Not with sirens or shouting or dramatic revelations, but with a simple email from my attorney at 7:12 a.m. "Harper, the Lane home remodeling loan has officially defaulted. Foreclosure proceedings initiated. The investment group is moving forward with acquisition." I sat back in my kitchen chair, coffee warming my hands, and let the truth settle over me. It was happening, all of it, exactly as the investigator predicted. Dad's business, Lane Home Remodeling, couldn't survive the debt load. His suppliers had pulled contracts. His remaining clients backed out. Payroll was overdue. And because the renovation loan was tied to the family home, the default triggered foreclosure on the house as well. The private equity firm I had quietly partnered with made their move immediately, sweeping in to acquire the distressed assets in a bundle. A deal that looked like just another portfolio transaction on paper. Professional, clean, legal. Nothing personal. Except the majority investor behind that deal was me. The warehouse that held my father's tools. The small office on Maple Drive he'd bragged about for 20 years. The house where they told me to go live in the streets. All of it was now under a company whose beneficial ownership listed one name. Harper Elaine Lane. Not through malice. Not through sabotage. Through consequence. Through cause and effect. Through their own decisions. The meeting. I didn't want chaos. I didn't want screaming. I didn't want a showdown on their front lawn. No, that was Chloe's style. Dramatic, emotional, designed for sympathy. I wanted clarity, closure, boundaries. So I had my assistant send a message. Dinner invitation. Business opportunity that could help the family. A location was attached. The nicest restaurant downtown, neutral ground, public enough to keep everyone civil. They agreed instantly, and when they walked in that night, it was like watching actors in a play. My parents approached with smiles too wide, voices too sweet. "Sweetheart," my mother gushed, kissing my cheek like she hadn't told people I was couch surfing. "We're so excited to see you." My father shook my hand like a man greeting a CEO he desperately wanted to impress. "We've heard amazing things, Harper. Just amazing." Chloe leaned close, her voice syrupy. That speech at the gala, incredible. We should totally collaborate. My boutique could help your brand clients create luxury experiences. I didn't correct her misunderstanding of what I actually did. Wasn't worth the energy. We sat. Drinks were poured. Polite conversation floated across the table like delicate bubbles, too fragile to touch. After appetizers arrived, I reached into my bag and placed a dark leather folder on the table. This, I said calmly, is why I asked you here. Chloe's smile faltered. My mother's eyes flicked to the folder like it was a snake. My father leaned back, crossing his arms. I opened it. Inside were printed documents, clean, organized, irrefutable. I slid the first page toward my father. He read. His face drained of color. This is our shop, he whispered. This is our house, our property deed. This must be a mistake. It was, I corrected gently, but not the kind you think. My mother snatched one of the documents, scanning it so fast she didn't finish sentences. No, this can't be right. How did a private equity firm get the loan? How the loan defaulted, I said. Your business couldn't cover the payments. The bank sold the debt. The firm bought it. I let the next sentence land slowly, deliberately. I am the controlling investor in that acquisition. Silence thickened the air until it felt heavy enough to suffocate. My father looked at me with a mixture of fear and disbelief. You bought us out? No, I said, shaking my head. You defaulted and the firm acquired what was left. Chloe swallowed hard, her voice thin. But why would you do this to us? We're your family. I let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. Why would I do this? I didn't force you to take a loan. I didn't tell you to forge my signature. I didn't run your business into the ground. I didn't funnel the loan money into your boutique. Chloe's eyes widened. You don't know that. I do, I said softly. I have the documentation. Her mouth snapped shut. My mother's eyes filled not with remorse but with anger. Harper, how could you embarrass us like this? How could you let strangers take everything we've built? This is cruel. I met her gaze. You forged my name on a loan, I reminded her, voice steady. You used my credit to fund a business I had nothing to do with. You told the world I was homeless. A failure. A burden. You told me to go live in the streets. My father's lips trembled. We were upset. We didn't mean everything we said. I know, I said. You meant worse. Silence cracked through the room again. Then I slid 2 more documents across the table. These are your options. They looked between me and the papers, confusion spreading. I clarified. Option 1. Sell the business and the assets back at fair market value. The firm, and by extension me, gets fully repaid. You walk away clean. We go our separate ways permanently. My mother stiffened. My father blinked rapidly. Chloe paled. Option 2. I lease the building and the house back to you for 6 months. Full market rate contract. Strict terms. No favoritism. No exceptions. And when the lease expires, we cut all ties. Chloe's voice cracked. You're kicking us out. I'm giving you options, I corrected, something you never gave me. My father's hand shook as he reached for the last page. It wasn't financial. It was legal. A declaration you will sign, I told them, acknowledging that you used my identity without consent. I will not pursue criminal charges. In exchange, you no longer interfere in my life. No more lies. No more stories at church. No more rewriting who I am. My mother covered her mouth, eyes wet. Harper, you would let our family fall apart over this? I finally let the truth sit on the table between us. You already let it fall apart, I said softly. I'm simply refusing to stay in the rubble. Chloe tried once more, reaching across the table as if she had any right to touch me. Harper, please. You can't just walk away. We're family. I looked at her hand, then at her face. Family doesn't forge your signature, I said. Family doesn't steal from you. Family doesn't call you useless and tell you to go live in the streets. I stood up, slipping the folder back into my bag. You didn't treat me like family, I finished. You treated me like collateral. My mother whispered my name like a prayer. My father tried to stand. Chloe reached again, desperate. But I stepped back and with calm, final clarity I ended it. You told me to go live in the streets, I said, voice low but steady. So I chose to buy the streets instead. Then I turned and walked out of the restaurant, not once looking back, because the moment I left that table I finally left them. Not in anger. Not in revenge. But in freedom. 6 months later, Seattle felt different. Not because the city had changed, but because I finally had enough peace inside me to notice things again. The scent of salt water drifting up from the sound. The hum of ferries cutting across the horizon. The soft glow of cafe windows during early morning walks. For the first time in my adult life, the world didn't feel like something I had to fight just to exist in. Felt like something I could build within, breathe in, live in. My parents, without the spotlight, news traveled quietly, the way truth often does when there's no ego left to broadcast it. My parents sold everything. Lane Home Remodeling went first. After months of sinking deeper into debt, they took the buyout option. Clean, simple, enough for them to close the door without scandal. They moved into a smaller house 2 towns over, a modest, aging 2-bedroom that barely resembled the place where I grew up. Their church groups still greeted them politely. But the spotlight they once clung to so desperately had dimmed. People whispered less. They attended fewer events. Without the facade of a thriving business or a perfect daughter to parade, they kept to themselves. I didn't check on them, but people who cared about me did. Megan, my cousin, sometimes Jacob. They always delivered the updates gently, like handling glass that once cut my hands. They're quieter now, Megan told me once. Life humbled them, Jacob added. Maybe for the first time. Chloe's fall was quieter but heavier. Her boutique closed once the funding pipeline from the renovation loan dried up. She tried to salvage it by downsizing, moving into a smaller space. But without a steady stream of borrowed money, the math didn't work. She tried to pivot, styling, consulting, personal branding workshops. But clients stopped coming once the family name no longer signaled influence. Last I heard, she moved into a small apartment and started working part-time at a retail store while figuring out her next steps. She wasn't ruined, just forced into reality. Forced to build on her own legs, not on the scaffolding of favoritism. And honestly, that was the fairest thing that could have happened to her. My life in Seattle? A new definition of home. My townhouse overlooked the waterfront, warm, plant-filled, lived in. A kitchen that always smelled like coffee, a reading nook by the big windows, a workspace with huge screens and sketches of new product ideas pinned to the wall. It didn't feel like a reward. It felt like something I'd earned long before I allowed myself to claim it. But the best part? The people inside it. My found family. My closest friends, the core members of my team, my mentor, an older investor who had taken me under her wing, not because of what I earned but because she saw me. And the neighbors. The retired artist downstairs who brought homemade soup when she knew I was working late, the couple next door. Who invited me to their Sunday brunches, the barista who knew my order without asking. None of them cared who my family was. None of them used me as a cautionary tale or a prop. They just saw me. Giving back. The way no one gave to me. I found myself drawn to young founders, especially the ones who had been dismissed by their families. Underestimated. Told their dreams weren't real careers. I became a mentor in a quiet, structured way, not to replace what I had lost, but to become who I needed when I was 20. Then I funded a scholarship program, small at first, designed for students cut off financially because they didn't follow the traditional path. Coding, entrepreneurship, design, e-commerce, fields where unconventional kids thrive. Every time I signed a document for a new grant, I felt a piece of my younger self straighten her shoulders. "You're not wrong," she whispered. "You were never wrong." Friendsgiving. A table where I finally belong. That November I hosted Friendsgiving for the first time. It wasn't planned to be emotional. I just wanted people I loved around a table with good food and warm lights. But when everyone arrived, Jacob with his homemade pie, my mentor with a stack of handwritten cards, my team members with laughter and loud energy, I felt something shift in my chest, a fullness I had never felt at the Lane family table. Halfway through dessert, someone asked quietly, "Do you ever miss them?" The room fell silent. I thought about it honestly, took my time. "Sometimes," I admitted, swirling my glass gently. "I miss the idea of them." A few nods around the table, but I don't miss the version of myself I had to be around them. I don't miss being told my life doesn't count. The table seemed to exhale. A shared understanding, a shared release. Walking through what I built. A few weeks later, I walked through the commercial block that had once held my father's remodeling shop. The building had new tenants now, small businesses run by people hungry to create something real. A bakery, a design studio, a small fitness space. The economic life blooming there didn't belong to the Lanes anymore, but it didn't belong to me either. It belonged to people building something from scratch. Honestly, quickly, passionately. I smiled, letting the winter air brush against my face. They wanted me to live in the streets, I thought. Instead, I invested in them. The final truth. Healing didn't come from revenge. It didn't come from buying businesses or turning tables or walking away victorious. Healing came from finally standing in a life I built without apology. A life not measured by their approval. A life that didn't rise or fall on their validation. A life where I finally stepped out of the role they forced me into. Because the truth is this, I didn't just survive being thrown out. I stepped out and built a life where their opinion doesn't pay the bills, doesn't define my worth, and definitely doesn't decide where I get to call home. Honestly, what would you have done in my shoes? Or have you ever faced a betrayal this deep from people you thought you could trust? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Take care.